Okay, Mr. Taylor here with Rockin' Math Basic Operation Notes. I think these are good for both 8th grade as well as Algebra 1. I think it's a very good concept for us to have. So please take these notes and wish you luck on your future endeavors. So, first thing we want to start off with is fractions. And it says to multiply fractions, you multiply straight across. Here we have 1/8 times 3/8. So we can multiply straight across. 1 times 3 is 3. And 8 times 8 is 64. Here it cannot be simplified. So the only thing we can do is just write 3 over 64. In some cases, you might need to simplify the answer so you can make sure you double check your answer. So, for instance, we have 2/3 times 1/2. Now, what I do is I go in first and, by first, I do something that's called cross dividing. So, I'm going to cross divide 2 and 2, and I'm going to be left with 1 and 1. So when I do that, I'm going to wind up with 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times 3 is 3. That's just a method you can do to avoid trying to simplify in the end of the problem. Let's see something else that I want you to look at. If one of the factors is a whole number, then you write that factor over 1. That's also seen to be a concept that we seem to misplace when we are multiplying whole numbers times fractions. Remember, a whole number is still rational. And we know that a fraction is rational. So what we just need to do is remember to place that whole number over 1, and again cross multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. Okay. If one of the factors is a mixed number, you write the mixed number as an improper fraction. Here we have 3 2/5 times 1/3. So you're going to multiply 5 times 3, which is 15, plus 2, and cross multiply 17 times 1, 5 times 3. And then when you get back, you want to change it from improper to mixed. Let's see something. Oh, division. Here's another concept that we seem to misplace the dynamics. Divide fractions. You keep the first term the same and change the division to multiplication. Then flip the second term. I think this is where we get that concept that we talk about called keep, change, flip. Another way of saying that, though, is to multiply by the reciprocal of the second term. For instance, we have 5/8 times 1/2, and what we do, we keep 5/8 the same, change multiplication to the inverse, which is, division to the inverse, which is multiplication, and then flip 1/2 to 2 over 1. And again, I'm back to my little, I love this. Just divide, cross divide, we'll get 4, cross divide, we'll get 1. And you can just multiply 5 times 1, which is 5, and 4 times 1, which is 4. And then all you got to do now is just change it to 1 and 1/4. I love that concept. Just practice it. I think you'll get it. Here you got a mixed number 4 and 2/5 divided by 1/3. Again, 4 times 5. Same concept up here with changing it to a improper. 5 times 4 plus 2 is 22 over 5 times 3 over 1, because the inverse of multiplication, division is multiplication, and then flip 1/3 to 3 over 1. Well, there's no way we can cross divide here, so we'll just multiply and get 66 over 5. and then do the simplification. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Okay, now when we add and subtract fractions, unlike multiplication and division, you must have the same or a common denominator. So in order to do this, for instance, like 5/8 plus 1/2, you have to find a least common denominator. And of course, we know factors of 2 is 2, 4, 8, and then of course 8 is 8. So we can look and say, okay, well, the least common denominator is 8. I said factors of, but I mean the factor 2. Anyway, then we change 1/2 into 8. So we will have, let's see, I think they made a mistake on this one. Let's look at this. This is 5/8 plus 1/2. So the least common denominator is 8. So we write 1/2 as 2/8. Oh, no, 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 no. We're not going to write it as 2/8. We write 1/2 as 4/8. Well, glad I checked that. And so we will have, let's just go ahead and take all this out of the equation here. We will have 5/8 plus 4/8, which is 9/8, and that's 1 and 1/8. Something. Wow. Anyway, that's taking a look at adding and subtracting fractions. The exact same thing. You have to find the least common denominator. Decimals, when you add and subtract decimals, one thing that I see another issue with is we think about adding and subtracting integers the same as adding and subtracting decimals, and that's not the case. We have to make sure we align decimal under decimal, and then you align numbers according to their place value. Okay, I remember just a little time ago we were adding 0.6 to 9.3, and we just lined that. Well, actually, we were adding 6 to 9.3, and we just lined that 6 over under the 0.3, and it should have been underneath the 9. So just make sure that you do that. Multiplication, you want to make sure that you multiply. Now you line the numbers up just like if there were no decimal, and then when you multiply, you go and count the number of places: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and count off 5 places, and it's just that easy. You just have to keep these rules and concepts in order. And when dividing decimals, you know you cannot divide by a decimal. You can divide a whole number into a decimal or an integer into a decimal. You cannot divide a decimal into a decimal. You have to make it a whole number is what we were taught, but it's really an integer because you can divide by a negative number as well. So just you have to keep that in mind. Look at this example here where you're dividing 3/10 into 24.9. You have to move your decimal place and then move your decimal place to on your divisor and your dividend. Just make sure you understand that. Let's see, move to here is where we have probably the most difficulty, and especially if you're in Algebra 1. Well, you know, if you can't get these basic integer operations, you're going to struggle in any type of mathematics. So this is something that I feel that you must spend a lot of time on. Just review it. Multiplication and division, we'll start off first. If the signs are the same, the answer is positive, regardless. So a negative times a negative is a positive times a positive is a positive. And if the signs are different, the answer is negative. So again, that works the same way. If you're dividing a negative 25 by a positive 5, you're going to get a negative 5 every time. So make sure you study these and understand these rules because they are very important. Now, when you're adding integers and they have the same sign, just add the integer and keep the sign, regardless what it is. Look at 4 plus 9. You just add it. You keep 13. But if you got a negative 4 plus a negative 9, add up the integer. 9 plus 4, 13. And you keep the negative sign. This is a big issue right here. Because we just believe, because we understand the multiplication and division, we have this notion that, oh, it's positive because the signs are the same. No. That's a whole different operation. So please, please, please. Now, if the signs are not the same, you find the difference, which means you subtract the two numbers and use the sign of the number that is the greatest distance from 0. So you have to understand you're taking the absolute value. Okay? Like negative 5 plus 4. Well, those signs are different. So you subtract 4 from 5. And because 5 has the greatest distance from 0, which is 5 units, even though it's negative, we actually keep the negative sign. And 12 plus a negative 3. Well, you have 12 units from 0, negative 3 units. So subtract 3 from 12, you get 9, and you keep the positive sign. Here, subtraction. To subtract an integer, you need to add the opposite of the integer being subtracted. You really need to hone in on this one. You really, really need to do that. You need to practice, 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 because I see so many problems being missed daily because we just won't take the time and eat this rule up. So to subtract an integer, you will need to add the opposite of the integer being subtracted. And we need to learn these terms. You know, we just can't continue be successful as we go forward. Remember, I tell all the time, math is a language. Is a language. I know your first words, as I asked one of my students the other day, what's the first thing you said when you were a child that you can recall? And he said, mama, dad, but you don't do that now. It's mother, father, or mama or daddy or whatever you may say, you know, but you don't go mama, dad, because you have now developed. So you want to learn these terms. So example, 7 minus 3. You just simply change that to 7, keep it the same, plus a positive 3. Always add the opposite. Or if you have negative 12 minus 8. Now that becomes negative 12 plus a negative 8. You go back to the rules of adding where it says if the signs are the same, add the numbers, keep the sign. So these are very important concepts that you really, really, really need to hone in on. And I believe that if you do, we will be successful this year on our 8th grade star. Mr. Taylor, Rocket Math.